Acknowledgement of country, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to say Yama. Yama de Gomeroi. Wallabag Nyani, Wunungalawa. Yama Mari, Mauramara, Ngale down. Ilya Yanbali. Ganamaris Gangal Gomeroi, Yamlanginda. Winalanginda, Winangalawa. That's the language spoken by our families and our communities here in Tamworth, making sure that we acknowledge the country that we're on and that we pay respects to old people who have cared and still care for this country. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sutherland. I might ask all those wishing to stand, and Pastor Scott Dunlop will deliver the council prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Evening, everybody. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you as the Lord of heaven and earth and the sustainer of all things. We thank you for the prosperity and stability that you've given to Tamworth and for the great community and freedom that we enjoy. Please continue to have your hand upon us. We pray that our community leaders will continue to build and strengthen our community, especially the councillors and staff of Tamworth Regional Council. Please give them great wisdom and unity, that every decision would be full of integrity and equity for the advancement of our region and community. We ask all of these things in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Councillors will declare the meeting open and call for apologies and leaves of absence. As we're all here, there are none. We'll move on to item 2 on the agenda, and it's community consultation. We have a number of people wishing to speak tonight, and the first item is Ben Hopkins. If I could ask Ben to come to the...
I'm just going to table the comments.
And you have 3 minutes, Ben, to state your case.
Okay. Item 6 of the agenda tonight is a motion from Councillor Rodder to develop a policy framework and staff, councillors and lobbyists. Generally, in this council, when a notice of motion is put by a councillor, there will be an immediate interaction with the council staff. This occurs in the form of a staff comment on the motion. Such a staff comment will be considered alongside the original motion before that motion is put to a vote. Tonight, the substance of the council staff's rejoinder to Councillor Rodder's motion is that the Office of Local Government has already considered the issue and is considering issuing a model lobbying policy under Section 23A of the Local Government Act. Both of these two proposals, the original motion from Councillor Rodder and the staff comment, accept the need for a framework for recording the interactions between the council and lobbyists. The problem, however, with the council staff's rejoinder is that it does not consider closely enough Councillor Rodder's motion, because Councillor Rodder clearly suggests the need to develop a policy framework which covers not only the interactions between council and lobbies, but a framework which records the interactions between councillors, council staff and lobbyists. The rejoinder from the council staff ignores their own role as a lobby. And yet, as you can see, even from the structure of the business case paper and the course of council meetings, the council staff have a lot of power to influence the decisions of the council. In this case, they can even insert their views directly into the council meeting business paper as a sort of last word. This is very effective. Tonight, for example, I predict that the council staff will be successful in this case of lobbying against the motion introduced by Councillor Rodder, and that his motion will be voted down. This blind spot of the Administrative Council to their own role as a lobby should concern the councillors and residents. One concrete procedure that could be considered if the council were to accept Councillor Rodder's motion is a policy to remove these staff comments from council business papers and meetings. This would allow more motions raised by councillors to pass without being effectively vetoed by the staff comments. I would like to remind the council of a recent notice of motion put on behalf of some residents at Loombra who turned up in great numbers to the council meeting. Although the motion put by Councillor Rodder was widely applauded in the chamber, the council staff drafted a new motion on the overhead projector in real time during the meeting. The original motion by Councillor Rodder was effectively forgotten and voted down. When this happens at repeated council meetings, it shows itself as an obvious pantomime and sometimes it's a predictable farce. A second concrete example of unrecorded lobbying that Councillor Rodder's motion might address is to be found in the draft Tamworth Regional Housing Strategy, which is currently on public exhibition. On page 40 of the draft strategy, the Council, to its credit, transparently and accountably shows the results of its engagement with the community and with the real estate lobbyists. Even if we don't all agree with the views expressed on page 40, this is the Council being transparent, accountable and open in its dealing with the housing lobby. However, in other places, the draft regional housing strategy does not acknowledge the impacts of lobbying on the councillors and the council staff. The housing strategy does not acknowledge that there is ongoing, secretive collaboration between the local government member, various large community housing groups and the Tamworth Regional Council to rezone large amounts of public land in North and East Tamworth in the name of social and affordable housing. Here I'd like to quote from the Honourable Kevin Anderson's webpage from October last year in an article called Breaking the Lock on Unused Land in Tamworth, where it states, quote,
Ben,
the New South Wales Liberal and Nationalist government...
I'll have to ask you to bring your...
last few paragraphs. Kevin Anderson states, the New South Wales Liberal and Nationalist government, Tamworth Local Aboriginal Land Council, Tamworth Regional Council and the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council have signed a historic agreement to unlock new housing sites in Tamworth, Mr Anderson said. These plans are concrete and yet are not mentioned in the draft regional housing strategy, which is currently on public exhibition. This is all happening with the full knowledge and participation of the Mayor and the Tamworth Regional Council staff, and yet is not acknowledged in the official strategic documents. I'm not saying that I'm for or against these plans to unlock public lands. That's a complicated question. The fact is, however, that the discussions are not being transparently or accountably conducted. I support Councillor Otter's motion to try and raise the standards for Tamworth Regional Council with regards to lobbying. I hope that I've shown how this often fails in the Council's open meetings and in the strategic documents regarding land and housing.
Thank you, Ben. I'll call on our second speaker, Daphne Mandel, to speak for item 9.4. Please come to the podium.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors and community. It is with a heavy heart I address you tonight. Put forward thoughts of the upcoming year, services by council, and I understand that they have put together their annual plan and budget for special variation. Sorry about that. The first year they have put together 4 million additional expenditure on roads. I don't like to speak bad about roads, but I had a road done in the front of my house. It didn't need doing. You know, what a waste. Increased pensioner rates, 222,000. Number 3, for the first year, 1.5 million on assets such as buildings, stormwater, recreation assets, including parks, trek and town hall. When it comes to assets, there are buildings around Tamworth that have not been looked after for quite some time. Year 2, number 1, 8.5 million being spent on council roads. 2, increase the pension rebate, 443,200. Note, this includes 222 mentioned last year, which brings us back to 221,200, which is calculated less. Over 3.3 million to be spent on council assets, such as buildings, stormwater and recreation. In year 1, you spent 1.5 million, and now, following year, you're doubling the spending to 3.3 million. Do you not look after the assets so that you don't have to spend so much the following year? So you are saying now that if you don't get your special rate variation, you're going to cut. You're saying that you have to implement special variation, then councillors will need to look at decreasing non-infrastructure services in considering the motion, such as libraries, they're going to shut 1, art galleries,
Beth, I'll have to ask you to bring your presentation to a close.
Beg your pardon?
I'll have to ask you to bring your presentation to a close. We allow only 3 minutes, and you have 4 minutes now.
I can't do this last little bit.
Little bit, you know.
With all these things you say that you're going to cut, you do not want the special variation waived. Are you really? The basic structure of a council is its community. And I might add that you're not thinking too clearly when you say that you're going to cut all these things. They really, council stands for, and if you cut them out, it'll be a joke. We have to use, and I'm asking you to use, common sense when it comes to this, because council's priority first is the community. And the community, if you keep the community happy, then
Thank you,
you're a
Deb.
good council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next speaker, which is Peter Gill, speaking to 9.4. And Peter, the same advice, you've got 3 minutes.
Right. Mayor, councillors, staff and visitors, I speak against. During the SRV exhibition process, I made 2 submissions, and the common theme of those was the potential to make internal savings. Having perused the IPART final report, page 45, table 8.1, this presents some benchmarking comparisons. One line benchmarks the ratio of population to FTE, which gives a reasonable match. However, looking at the line employee costs as a percent of operating expenditure, general fund only percentage, TRC is at 43% versus New South Wales average of 37%. This to me highlights an area of potential savings. My submission highlighted a ratio of office to desk staff numbers, office and desk staff numbers to operative staff at 1:1, based on the rate of Ray Walsh House numbers. This is an alarmingly high ratio, which reflects in the 43% noted above. I have observed that council meetings tend to push the financials to later in the meeting agenda, when the tendency is to curtail time. Is potentially greater. Additionally, I note that the financials appear to attract a few questions. Is there appetite to reconfigure the meeting agenda? Monthly budget variations are presented at general ledger levels, preventing scrutiny at cost centre or project levels, hampering the ability to see and respond to emerging situations. My background had a heavy focus on the monthly forecast to complete the projects with monthly reconciliation. More transparency would be obtained in reflecting savings made through specific improvement processes by reporting these separately against their respective budgets. Over the last few years, there's been a significant quantum of cost overrun in construction. no doubt figuring heavily in the rundown of the cash position. These events appear to culminate in post-end project approvals for significant transfers. This highlights the need for better cost control, coupled with more detail from project cost centre level reporting. Transparency and understanding would be greatly improved. Reference to the 2022-23 annual report, page 29 of 96, material variations more than 10%, makes reference to a major 102% overrun on materials and services. The explanation provided for 38 million overrun is difficult to reconcile from the description provided. These overruns approximate $3 million a month, and thus should have been obvious in the monthly.
I've given you a bit of extra time too, so.
In summary, I believe
Peter?
the points made
Peter?
above, if implemented,
Peter?
would contribute.
I've given you a bit of extra time too, so can you bring your.
It is, I just on the last. So, in summary, I believe that points made above, if implemented, would contribute to improved financial reporting and transparency.
Thank you. And Peter, you're also registered to speak on item 10.2.
Correct. Sorry, I left my glasses behind tonight. No, I'm right, thanks. Mayor, council, staff and visitors. Item 10.2 touches on the very transparency and accountability advocated by item 6.1. The motion reads that in relation to the report, Tamworth Regional Tourism Precinct Strategy and Business Case, Council adopts the business case for future grant funding applications use. The reference report at page 779 and 862 seeks endorsement for adoption of option 1, 38.1 million in capital funding, 27.7 of that being from state or federal grants, $1.2 million from the sale of the ACMHF, and $4 million from the sale of the BEC precinct land to the preferred developer. And then there's an $8 million operating deficit funding from TRC sources. The motion combines the approval of business case and the sale of land into a single motion. The proposal commenced with a EOI, business in confidence, and is now presented in a bulldozer fashion without opportunity for scrutiny or contribution by the public. I sense that this item 10.2 was somewhat rushed and note that some milestones on page 849 are passed already. I'm not opposed to the VEC. In fact, I highly commend the principle, albeit with some modifications. The land parcel opposite Trek presents a unique traffic and access layout eminently suitable to a VEC. It allows prominence, accessibility both ways, easy options to return if you drive past it. Country to me is not a city-centric development focused on spinning a developer buck. Rather, it is the leisurely and relaxed ambience of open space without feeling crowded and having easy access and parking. In my view, the proposed sale does not present bang for buck for TRC ratepayers. A far more relaxed theme benefit befitting country and the VEC be adopted. Retail and gyms do not fit into that land parcel. Motels and restaurants may be complementary if they're located so as to not crowd out the VEC. The land parcel should stay in possession of TRC and be developed such that the current VIC mistake, that's the existing centre, is not repeated. The existing VIC, initially an optimal setting, became crowded out by commercial interests under the watchful eye of successive councils. Thank you.
Councillors, that brings us to the conclusion of community consultation. We'll move on to item 3, which is minutes of the previous meeting. Could I have a mover and second that they're turned through quickly? Move Councillor Sutherland, second Councillor Bird. Any comment, councillors? There being no comment, I'll put that recommendation that be approved. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Councillors, we'll move on to item 4, disclosure of interest. Do we have any disclosures of interest? Councillor Sutherland.
Mr Mayor, just want to declare a less than significant non-pecuniary interest in item 8.1 for the local traffic committee around the road closures for NAIDOC week. I am on the NAIDOC committee, but I will be staying in the room for that conversation.
Thanks, Councillor Sutherland. Any other disclosure of interest? There being no other disclosures of interest, we'll move on to item 5, mayoral minute. There is no mayoral minute. And we'll move straight into item 6, which is a notice of motion. Councillor Watto.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move a notice of motion as per printed in if I have a second.
Seconded, Councillor Mears.
Thank you, Councillor Mears. I'd like to reserve my right to speak at this time, Mr Mayor.
Any comments, councillors? Is there any speakers against? There's no further comments.
Just a question, Mr Mayor. Question to the General Manager. We've had 2 reports from the Department of Local Government and the Ombudsman and ICAC over the ensuing years. Can you tell me how many, through you, Mr Mayor, how many incidents have been recorded in this last 12 months?
To my knowledge, Councillor Mears, haven't been any. 0.
0. Question?
I just have a question, thank you, Mr Mayor. The notice of motion seems to just drift off to "and in particular," and I'm just wondering if there was any further wording after that particular part of the notice of motion.
Councillor Rodder would have to answer that.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor and Councillor Coates. I actually did believe that a supporting information formed the motion, A, B and C of my notice of motion. Yeah.
Reserve your right to speak, Councillor Rodder, so you may speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll certainly keep my comments brief given the size of the business paper, but I believe the people of our local government area are calling out for such policy. They want our council's dealings relating to public infrastructure and other publicly owned assets to be, and other arrangements relating to the business of council to be transparent, accountable and open. Around the country, trust in our institutions generally is at a low ebb. Focus Area 9 speaks about open and collaborative leadership, transparent and accountable leadership. Adoption of this recommendation demonstrates that we are leaders in this area rather than just having it as a footnote on a council report.
That closes debate. Councillor Rodder, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The motion is lost.
Could we record division, please, Mr Mayor?
Most definitely. Councillors, we'll move on to...
No, division.
Oh, sorry, we've had a division. Councillor Rodder and Councillor Mears are against.
Could we
Do it 4.
Before the motion.
Oh, sorry, 4. The other councillors all against. Thank you.
Can we have a show of hands, Mr Mayor? I didn't see any hands coming up.
Those in support of the recommendation, put your hands up. Those against?
Thank you.
The vision is recorded. Councillors, we'll move on to item 7.1. Could I have a move in the second, please? Move Councillor Southwell, second to Councillor Sutherland. Councillor Southwell, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak against that recommendation? Any further comments on that recommendation?
Yes.
Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment that although it's seemingly complex, by providing a more user-friendly and simple to understand method of assessment and the guidance for selection, the whole process should be easy for people to navigate, and I think that's quite important. And for that reason, I approve the draft on wastewater management.
Thanks, Councillor Coates. Further comments? Councillor.
Just a quick comment, Mr Mayor, and that is that in support of the recommendation, I think that it goes to an extent to encouraging small and medium businesses to participate in the creation of these spaces and benefiting really in the housing shortage that exists across the community. I think that, you know, deferring this payment is going to help our community in the long run. Thank you.
Further comments, councillors? There being no further comments, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Councillor will move there on to 7.2. Could I have a move and a seconder? Move Councillor Rodder, seconded Councillor Burke. Councillor Rodder, you wish to speak to that?
Just quickly, Mr Mayor, that in 2020, when this was first discussed, I happily advocated for the policy to be more flexible to encourage both small and large developers to consider investing in our region, particularly in light of the pandemic. This policy largely lifts the upfront burden from developers and projects and may encourage greater diversity in the development market. A bank guarantee would be acceptable security in lieu of the additions to the second schedule of title documents, but probably should be applied on a case-by-case basis.
Anyone wishing to speak against that recommendation? Further comments on the recommendation? There being no further comments, I'll put the recommendation. 7.2, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. That brings us to the end of environment and planning. We'll move on to item 8, infrastructure and services. Item 8.1. Could I move Councillor Betts, seconded Councillor Mears. Councillor Betts, do you wish to speak to that? Anyone wish to speak against that recommendation? Comments on that recommendation? I will put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. We'll move straight from there on to item 9, 9.1. Could I have a move in a second? Councillor Coates, seconded Councillor Sutherland. Councillor Coates, you wish to speak to that?
Yes, Mr Mayor, and obviously what can be said, because the sundry debtors is a confidential document, and obviously we can't have in-depth conversation, but I just wanted to advise my fellow councillors and the people in the room that I have been asking questions around the debts and how they've occurred and the methods that we're actually, as a council, putting in place to mitigate these kinds of things going forward. So, thank you.
Further, anyone wish to speak again? Further comments? Councillor Council.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just briefly, I'd like to commend Councillor Coates on some of her emails to our finance department in this space. It's very, very frustrating to see this amount of money, $654,000, which needs to be written off because we can't obviously chase those debts for various reasons. Either the company's gone on liquidation and various reasons. Through Councillor Coates' discussions, there has been some recommendations for improving this in the future. And a couple of those was potentially getting some bank guarantees in the future. And another one was upfront payments for some of our suppliers. So I hope that some of those potential recommendations from our internal specialists could be, I guess, implemented so that this sort of figure, we're not looking at this sort of figure into the future. Thanks.
Anyone, any other comments, councillors? Councillor Rodder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It is extremely disappointing that in regards specifically to the amount of $649,415.64 of the second part of the write-off, and disappointing we cannot out them publicly. As many people here would understand that that company continues to trade in a different form and in this country, and despite their specific company arrangements, I think it's appalling that we've got no recourse to the parent company to retrieve some of those funds.
I don't disagree, councillor Rodder. Further comments? There being no further comments, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Councillors, will go to item 9.2, council investments. Could I move in a second to councillor Tickle, second to councillor Sutherland. Councillor Tickle, you wish to speak to that? Anyone wish to speak against that report? Further comments on that report? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Councillors, will move to item 9.3. Annual operation budget variation. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coates, seconded councillor Sandfield. Councillor Coates, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Anyone wish to speak against that recommendation? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Councillors, will move to item 9.4. Could I have a mover and a second? I move councillor Betts, seconded councillor Tickle. Councillor Best, you wish to speak to that?
Yes, Mr Mayor. This is a hard decision that any councillor has to make, but it's absolutely necessary. The unfunded mandates and rate pegging has put councils right across New South Wales into this predicament. And back in 2004, we had 5 councils that had to amalgamate into one, purely to survive, because some of the councils were basically destitute and could not survive, and that was because of the unfunded mandates, as I said, and the rate pegging. This is something that we have to do, because if we want to maintain services and jobs for our future, our children of the future, we have to do that to maintain a growing economy and a sustainable economy. And I know we had some in the media and on the social media that it was 97% people were against the rate variation, but that was 97%, and there was 1,800 people that responded to that survey. There are 60,000 people in our area, and the reports that I'm getting, people want to have sustainability for their children of the future. So I'll be supporting the recommendation, Mr Mayor. Thanks.
Councillor Betts, before you sat down, but I'd just like to advise councillors that on one of the items in that digital transformation under this, amend page 20 of Annex 2, draft statement of revenue policy 24-25 to reflect water consumption charges. They are 4.9% higher than the consumption charges levied in 23-24. Not as written in the documents that you have before you. That's just an amendment that had to be changed to be corrected, so be aware of it.
Mr Mayor, the amendment's on the screen.
Councillor Betts, you moved that, and you're happy with that?
Yeah, I'm happy to accept that, Mr Mayor.
And Councillor Tickle, you seconded that, so you're happy with that? Councillor Tickle?
Yes.
Anyone wish to speak against that recommendation?
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. To amend the recommendation that the proposed 36.3% increase be spread across 5 years in lieu of the proposed 2 years to stretch the burden of this large increase over a longer period during this cost of living crisis for many residents of our local government area.
Councillor Rodder, I see where you're going and understand where you're going, but the instrument that this was issued under, from my part, is for 2 years, and what you've asked to do is actually an invalid amendment, wouldn't be legal, so we couldn't actually accept that. Because it has to be over 2 years. That's what the instrument under the section says. It's 2 years, and if we can't go to 5 years because it's under 2 years. So the only way that we can really talk about that is if you want to vote for it or you vote against it.
So, as an elected representative, you're saying that we cannot write to IPART and say, as democratically elected representatives of TRC, we would like to request that the approval for 2 be extended to 5.
No, we can't, because we actually wrote to IPART as a council, and I know that you were not supporting that first correspondence with them, to accept a 36.3% over 2 years increase. They came back and approved that 36.3% increase over 2 years. So it's either we vote for that or we vote against it. We're not allowed to we can't ask for an extension of that to extend that rating 36.3 over 5 years. We just can't do it. As the General Manager, we wanted to help. We'll make any comments on there to add what I've said.
Mr Mayor, the only thing I'd add is that the only flexibility the councillors have around the instrument issued by IPART is you can defer any 1 year or 2 years of that increase for up to 10 years, but you can't change the spread. The spread was done on the basis of the financial modelling that was done and accepted by council as part of the application. IPART's advice to us is that if you wanted to modify that to be spread over 5 years, it would be a completely new application process.
Sorry, Councillor Rodder, but that's our legal position. We have nowhere to go there. Further comment, further speaking here, Paul? Further speakers, Paul? Councillor Coates?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In terms of what we're actually looking at tonight, the IPNR documents, we're looking at a suite of documents. We're not just looking at this decision, and there's been months of work by staff and we all know there's been lots and lots of council workshops and hours of reading and review and discussion of multiple draft documents. And the annual plan, the delivery plan, the revenue policy with the detailed budget, all of those things. There's one item that I would like to actually just highlight, and that I was pleased to see in the detailed budget that we didn't actually have any increases over around about 8% with most of our charges. I do recognise that there was over 10% with pools, but when we actually looked at the actual amount, it was 50 cents. But I think the other thing too, for me, it's about recognising the elephant in the room and the angst that's actually around this proposed special rate variation. And look, I think I can honestly say there's no one in this room, at this table, in this community that wants to do this. And when we were elected as councillors by our friends and our family and our peers and our co-workers and the residents of Tamworth Regional Council, it was to be the voice of the people. And in doing so, we have to abide by the oath that we made, but to also conduct ourselves in a physically responsible manner. And I think that we all acknowledge there's been lots of, I'll call them negative emails and feedback, and we've seen that. And some of that has actually been directed in terms of not only because we support the rise, but also because council created the problem with poor management, greed, overpayment, under-delivery, etc. However, the problem hasn't just arisen now. There was, when we actually put in, with IPART, they actually released a statement in February saying that there was ongoing concerns for the financial sustainability of all local governments and councils. And then as a result of that, the New South Wales Government has accepted a recommendation for an independent inquiry into the current financial model of councils. And in terms of the current financial plan paying, people are experiencing it across the country. And there have been many contributors to this at the moment: banks and supermarkets and fuel companies and insurance companies, rental costs, energy providers, just to name a few. And unfortunately, the money that we pay to them without any control goes out of our region. When we're talking about a rate increase, the money stays here and we actually spend it in our region. And I think to remind people that councillors are also part of the community. We live in the community. And I understand that it does make it easier to express to us, the frustration and the pain and the anger that people are feeling about such a rate rise proposal. But if I just want to let me focus on 1 minute for it, cost shifting, which is the shifting of financial burden from higher level of government to a lower level without the provision of corresponding or adequate funding or revenue raising capacity. Things like roads, waste levies, rural fire service, emergency service levy, the list goes on. And I want people just to take in mind one number. $460.67. Now, that's the average amount per ratepayer per year that has resulted as a result of cost shifting. So that's the thing, the government, state governments and federal governments are not providing our community and expect local council to do that with a limited revenue base. So I think that I can honestly say that if we don't look at having more money to at least maintain the services that we have, we actually will, it's quite possible that we will end up having to do that in the future anyway, or unfortunately, like some councils, there will be administrators come in and they will have no regard for the community and trying to make it as easy as possible. And for me personally, to feel like I've made an informed decision around this proposed rate rise, I've done hours of reading and research. I've looked through Tamworth Regional Council documents and looked at the situations of similar councils in New South Wales, and 3 of those are very, very similar to us. We're doing better than some, we're doing worse than some, but we're certainly not outstandingly worse. I've also read the IPART report, which has supported our application, and I have read the submissions by other councils to the state government on the inquiry into the ability of local governments to fund infrastructure and services. And I have also read all the submissions by the residents of our region made over the last 10 months or so. And it is, hand on heart, I can say this decision tonight is a difficult one, as it will impact not just residents, but me, my family, my friends, and those around me. There is no one that's going to be excluded from having this impact. But I think that if we want to maintain at least what we've got and regain some of the assets and bring them back to where they need to be, we actually have to take this rate rise and support it. And I think last but not least, and I can't say this loud enough or often enough, I want to encourage anyone who is genuinely struggling with paying their rates to chat with council about our hardship policy. That is actually what it exists for. Thank you.
Further speakers against?
Speaker against, Mr Mayor. Speaker against. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I reject this rates impost that will impact every resident, pensioner, renter, business owner and farmer. As described by one fellow ratepayer, this is an absolutely eye-watering increase. What we are doing is increasing our residents' cost of living, increased cost of living on a community that consists of a significant lower socioeconomic population, but that's not all. Even residents living in the smaller communities feel aggrieved, as do residents in more affluent areas of our local government area, such as East Tamworth, Moore Creek and parts of Hillview, about the impact to their household budgets and lifestyles as well. I know of some residents that have given up and are selling, or have sold and have left, professional people that our communities can ill afford to lose. They are disappointed that as the closest tier of government to our residents, our council seems to have precious little empathy for them. The results of consultation have been skewed to deliver an outcome that supports the increase, despite 97% of respondents saying no. But bemusing to many, the answer is still yes. Consultation consisted of box ticking to please IPART. To be honest, I was surprised that IPART approved the increase given its opposition to our last business SRV of more than 4 years ago, and similarities to consultation back then and now. Many residents have complained to me about a council refusing to live within its means. They have also been frustrated by the threats of what we will lose if we don't agree. We could have a moratorium on vacant employee positions until we determine if those vacant positions are genuinely required. Our wages and salaries bill is exorbitant. In 22-23 was an astonishing figure of more than 57,688,000 before we even get to do anything for our residents. That needs to be gleaned from the rates of thousands of properties. Rationalisation of the vehicle fleet. The cost of infrastructure should be met by developers not retrospectively by the ratepayer, to name just a few. As for assistance, an additional $50 rebate for a pensioner won't address the impulse of 36.3% rate increase, not to mention the 4.9% increases each to water and waste. The hardship policy will be difficult to access, as residents will have to provide significant personal information to justify long payment plans which don't reduce the rate burden but simply postpones it. Mr Mayor, I've been running my own poll on this matter via a reputable survey tool. The results reflect the 97% of those that responded to Morrison Low consultation, with a massive 95.20% opposed. Many, 59.68%, would accept spreading the burden over many years. 94.4% of ratepayers believe that councillors should heed feedback, and 91.13% said consultation over the 36.3% increase was insufficient. There were many thoughts and concerns expressed by fellow ratepayers that would exceed my 5 minutes. Many comments were about poor consultation, failure to listen to residents, the burden on so many ratepayers and businesses, and the lack of empathy about the rates increase. In relation to the so-called leak of Council's key messages document marked for internal use only, I believe that it was a very timely leak of a document full of passive-aggressive undertones, veiled threats to councillors and the community at large that council will sell ALEC, Trek, Ray Walsh House or the old athletics fields, or renegotiate peppercorn rents for the custodians of numerous sporting assets if we didn't vote for the rate increase. For the record, I reject the threats contained in the document, and I am opposed to privatisation of public infrastructure as demonstrated by my decision regarding Ray Walsh House. Without changes to spending, I fear it will be business as usual and the proceeds of the rate increase frittered away, and we'll be asking for more funds soon enough from fellow ratepayers. And I know that when I sit down, some councillors may seek to shoot the messenger, to dispute the thoughts that I have presented here, but these have been gleaned from fellow residents and ratepayers and the community I love, and I am their conduit in this matter.
Further comments for? Here's you want to speak for?
No.
Further comments for Councillor Pickle?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in support of this, my position hasn't changed, but what I would like to say, we keep hearing about this 97% of respondents and all the rest of it, but I would like to point out that we have 36,000 rateable properties, 36,000 in Tamworth, and overall I understand we've had less than 2,000 submissions, or a lot of those were petitions with multiple signatures on them, they weren't individual, which equates to less than 5% of those that own rateable properties. So it really is a small proportion that we're talking about. Like when people say 97%, that is a bit misleading, because we've got 36,000 rateable properties. We haven't had 36,000 responses, which suggests that people understand why we're having to do this. I also continue to be surprised, and I'm sure that everyone in the audience tonight has realised, or in fact are ratepayers for that matter, it is only on the general rates. Even as late as yesterday I said to someone, it's only on your general rates, only on portion year rates, it's not on the total rates. So if you pay over $4,000 a year in race, which I do, it's not calculated on that total amount, it's on the general rates. But I don't know how we get that message across, because I was surprised with the people I've spoken to in the last few days, for that matter, that didn't understand that. So I think that's a point that we should continue to make. As with all businesses, as we've said before, our costs have also gone up. Everyone knows costs have gone up. Roads and other infrastructure costs, 20 to 30%. I mean, anyone who's done any house renovations at home, that would know that that is a figure. I was surprised that one of the speakers didn't want their road fixed. I'm sure our manager of roads would love to hear more of that, because it's one of our biggest complaints is roads. And of course, a big proportion of this increase, it will be going immediately into roads, additionally to what we've already budgeted for.
Further speakers against? Yes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like Councillor Rise to speak against and vote against this motion. Mark Wright had it, or Councillor Wright had it written down a bit more eloquently than I'll put it, and I'd rather shoot off the cuff. But we heard tonight that there was an insignificant number of people, yet again, it was 860 plus submissions and about 3,200 signatures on that document. So that's a fair bit more than a couple of thousand. That's 4,000. So people are still contacting me on a daily basis, very concerned over the rate increase that they can't afford. We mentioned earlier about, I think Councillor Rodder talked about extending that period over a 5-year period, which obviously it can't be. But during the consultations, I actually asked if that could be done, and I was told no. I said, could we spread it over a 3 or 4 year period? No was the answer. So based on what I believe was not accurate information, again, I stayed no from the beginning. And we had a workshop recently, which was a terrific one on social housing and plans in that space. And the presenter actually said they got 380 submissions on that item on the agenda, and said that was 97% accurate based on 380 submissions. So bearing that we got well over double that should give a clear indication that those figures were accurate enough to move forward on. And heavens forbid we don't listen to our residents. It is a difficult decision, and I take that on board for every councillor here and the council staff that are trying to put papers together to help balance the budget. But consistently we hear it's only $4. It's only $200 a year. I can afford it, and I'd be happy to pay double on my rates next year for that portion. But there are a lot of people here that $4 a week will mean the difference between sending their kids to school with a lunch, or at times having to use breakfast clubs. And breakfast clubs at schools are a great innovation to help families and kids out, but it's a real detriment to our communities that we have to supply free breakfasts and lunches to kids at school because and it's not an impost on the families, that the current financial situation for people has meant they can't afford to feed their children, and other people have to. We call more and more on volunteer organisations to feed the community, feeding in schools, etc., etc. And this is just another cost on top of everything else that's going to slam people in the face. As I said, I don't have a problem personally paying it, but I'm not voting for me. I'm voting for the residents that have instilled in me, or that put me in place to speak on their behalf. And there's enough commentary going around from the people that contact me, from the 860 submissions for the 3,200 petitions, to have me support what they want. I've taken some beatings over the last 6 months in relation to that. Councillor Rod has as well. Only for representing the people that elected us. I'm not here for my own benefit. As I said, I can afford to pay the increase. It doesn't matter to me, and I'm one of the ones. But resident after resident after resident has contacted me and said they can't afford it. No one's listening to me. So whether I want the rate increase or not, and perhaps it is necessary financially, but the residents who speak to me have asked me to portray their voice, and they say no to the rate increase. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mears. Just to qualify one of the comments you made about asking could it go for a longer period, and I know you did do that, that we wouldn't have been able to because there were a couple of councils in this iteration of rate increases. There'll be many more next year. I did seek to have that over a longer period, and I knocked them back and said 2 years is where you've got to be.
Can I respond? Prior to our decision, I checked with Armidale. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I checked with Armidale, and theirs is over a 3 year period. And in the group that came out on the IPART decision on I think it was the 15th, there's another council in that group that theirs is spread over 3 years. So had we have applied for it over a lengthy period, there could have been a decision by IPART.
That was the year before, and that is correct. But this year
in our group, sorry, Mr. Mayor,
Well, I'm not sure who they were.
I can find out, but I can tell you. But on that group that came out from the information that the General Manager and Council sent out on the rate increases for that variation week, there was a council in there that was spread over a 3-year period.
I can name 2 councils that asked for 3 years and got knocked back.
Well, there are some that got it.
I can't comment because I don't know the details of the ones you took. Anyway, look, we'll move on. Further speakers for? Councillor Berg.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And Mr Mayor, I rise to support the IPART granted rate increase. I think it's important that we recognise that we're only talking about 18.5 tonight, that the balance of the 36.3 will actually, in my understanding, be adopted by the next coming council, the incoming council. Mr Mayor, this has been a really tough decision in terms of making a fiscal decision that's actually going to set the council up for success rather than for failure. And Mr Mayor, I hope that you're going to talk about some other councils and the dilemmas that they've faced. I understand full well what's happened in Bathurst, where Bathurst have knocked back the application process. The Mayor, I think the General Manager have both gone. I know that the council is in a dire financial position, and the problem is that it takes a long lead time for the decision making at council level, the application process through IPART, and then the decision to adopt, and then the decision to implement and actually start receiving those increasing rates. Mr Mayor, when we first embarked on this journey, IPART had granted us a 2.5%. We did our budgets on 2.5, and we had to go back and recast our budgets because they made a pretty quick determination that 2.5 was completely out of context of where the cost increases of councils had been, and immediately increased the rate peg to 4.9. We had an approval process that allowed that to be approved, to rejig our draft and our figures. So already we've chewed into 5% of the 18.5. So, Mr Mayor, we're really only seeking in this next financial year to be 12% above that in contextual terms. But, Mr Mayor, the thing that worries me most about our financial budgeting and reports is on page 203 and 284 about our cash reserves. And it's our cash reserves from our general fund that are really the barometer of a healthy council. And the projections to go from 7 million to 3 million over 5 years without any rate variation, but a 4.9, is really an indictment of a trajectory to death. Mr Mayor, we, with the rate variation approved, actually reverse that trend and allow this council to be able to deliver on the services that we continue to provide for our residents. It's been acknowledged, Mr Mayor, that the significant lion's share of the rate increase will go to roads and road maintenance. And also, Mr Mayor, I think Councillor Coates indicated a number of about $400 per resident that we've actually taken away from us by way of having the cost-sharing arrangements. We talked about the emergency services levy and other things. And I think that almost equates somewhere around the rate increase that we're seeking, that total dollar remuneration, to replace the loss of the cost sharing that's come down on us from federal and in particular in the state governments. Mr Mayor, we with the current situation both state and federally, our grant income that we've received, which is not a reliable source of income, has completely dropped off the radar. We're addressing in tonight's meeting the Skywalk, the Aquatic Centre, and the digital transformation that's not funded, but both those other two with significant funding outcomes with regards to the former state government. And Mr Mayor, it's just a tragedy at this point that the federal government didn't co-contribute the other 15 million for the Aquatic Centre. So it's leaving us to what do we do as a council if we miss out on the 15 million that we have. I think it would be derelict if we didn't make sure that we committed our contribution to that to get a wonderful facility that the community needs. Mr Mayor, I said I wasn't going to talk for long. I think it's probably the hardest decision that we've had to make. hopefully, if the decision is adopted tonight, it not only lays the platform for financial security going forward, it takes away the lion's share of the burden for the incoming council post the September elections, and that they have to then consider what they do with the balance of the 36% increase. Thank you.
Thanks, councillor. Third, councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'm speaking in support of all 12 of the recommendations that's up in front of us. And contrary to Councillor Rodder's comment, I don't believe that we're here to shoot the messenger. I truly believe that as councillors we have the best interest of community at heart, and we might have a different opinion on what that looks like moving forward, but I truly have faith in that belief that councillors are here in that space. We got issued 2 sets of documents, in regards to our opinion, one with what a base case would look like and one what the SRV scenario would look like. This is a projection of looking forward, saying that with the current level of service delivery, based on the cost of that service delivery, looking into the long-term future, there's a deficit. The cost of the world around us has gone up and we need to make a decision. And for me, the decision is clearly outlined in the papers. Do we support the business case and reduce services to make sure we can stay sustainable? Or do we increase the level of income that we generate from community in the form of rates to make sure that we can deliver the quality needed? I hear Mrs Mendel's comments, around in the community consultation, talking around what is the cost of the base case to community. We understand what the cost of the rate variation is. We understand, as Councillor Tickle said, in regards to the general fund, what that looks like across the region. That's really well documented, and where that money goes, as discussed, is really clearly identified. I'm shocked to hear that councillors who are not in support of the recommendation haven't raised the base case as an option. I'm surprised that an amendment didn't come forward from people who don't support all 12 of those recommendations and say, look, we're going to keep moving forward as a council, but we're going to choose to adopt the base case. And the fact that that hasn't come forward means that we all know what the cost of the base case is. And the cost of the base case is a reduction of services at the cost of community. At the cost of community, the cost of an organisation being able to look after its key priority, which is the people. And if we're not focused on the people and running an organisation that's sustainable to suit the growing needs and aspirations of any community, well, then we're not doing our job as leaders of this organisation, as elected councils. And so for me, it's a tough decision, because I hear all of the voices who have said they can't afford the increase. The cost of living is too much, and they're not wrong. They're not wrong at all, because it's a reality. I'm struggling to pay for nappies as it is. The cost is real, but if you look at what the cost of the community would be if the base case was accepted, it's a future of a community that no one would want to live in, because services wouldn't be at a level that community would be able to function in a way that we need to, in the way that we want. So in that comment, I am in support of the recommendation, including adopting the special variation scenario with the rate increase, because for me that is the most responsible decision that I can make to make sure that as a community we are moving forward in the direction that we need to in a sustainable future. Mr Mayor, I also just want to point out one other topic, and that was the Skywalk. I know that the Skywalk has been getting a lot of conversation about the need and kind of being projected as a luxury item. What's missing in that conversation is that scenic drive, or as I like to call it, the lookout road, or that road of death on football training when your mates are run up it in pre-season, has been identified as a safety risk. And it's not absurd to think that the amount of people walking up and down that hill on a road shared with vehicles is at danger, putting people at risk. Now we have to solve this moving forward. We have 2 options in my mind, and one is that we chew into the mountain and create a walk path with massive earthworks, with massive civil engineering at a massive cost, or we can accept $14 million from the state government as an alternative and get a pedestrian footpath built on the side of the road. For me, that is more cost effective and is a more rational decision in saying that as a council, we are looking forward to the financial longevity and making decisions in the best interest of community. And I feel like that Skywalk conversation is being misunderstood rather than we're going to need to address it. And it is a much smarter option to accept state funding to be able to solve that rather than relying on capital works for council ourselves. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I won't talk for too long. I think a lot of it's already been said. My 2 cents worth is that I personally don't want rates to go up. The cost of living is huge. It's impacting everyone. But I'm not here as an individual. I'm here as a councillor, an elected member, and I'm here to represent the best interests of their communities, which has been spoken about by my fellow councillors tonight. Increased costs have gone up. We're not immune to these. They're impacting the private sector, not-for-profit, charities, businesses. For some reason, many people in the community think that government is immune to this. We're not. We're massive spenders in our communities, and all our costs have gone up as well. So it's just a natural thing that, unfortunately, this has to occur. We don't want to be like Bathurst. It's been spoken about. We've got rate pegging, which means our ability to earn revenue is completely capped. We've got unfunded mandates and cost shifting that's coming at us from every direction. However, the important thing to note is the expectations of our communities are going up. So they're not saying to us, you know what, scrap it. We don't need libraries. Or, you know what, let's just go with all our dilapidated pools, even though they're basically at end of life. Our communities are saying, we want more. We want better things for our communities because we're a growing regional centre. Tamworth Regional Council is one of the best councils in regional Australia. Seriously, we've won numerous awards, and you go to some of the state and federal conferences and we're setting a benchmark. Now, places like Bathurst are not, unfortunately, and they haven't made the tough decision that we have tonight, which is to move our communities forward and do the right thing. If we're not going to do this, I would ask my fellow councillors that have voted against it, what would you actually do? Would you delete the pools, close down the libraries, or maybe we close down our finance department or our IT department? Maybe we don't need a HR department. I mean, really, what are you actually going to take away? That's what I would ask you. The other thing is roads has been discussed. Now, there is a considerable amount of money going into roads. When I was first elected on this council 2.5 years ago, the number one issue that was raised throughout the community was our roads are shit. We've got 3,000 kilometres of roads, over 3,000 kilometre roads that we need to maintain. I'm sad to hear about the Garden Street road that didn't need doing, but there is some information that can be talked to, and I'd love to have a chat to you, Daphne, because we have changed the way in which our roads are resurfaced, and part of that is actually updating some of the road surface so that it has a longer lifespan. But it's a complicated area. I'd love you to have a chat to our director at some point in the future about that. But in short, this is a decision that's going to improve our community. We're a growing regional centre. The funds are needed for some pretty amazing projects into the future. Some of them have already been spoken about. The Aquatic Centre, we've basically got pools that are at end of life. The Skywalk, later on in today's meeting, we'll be talking about tourism. It's $296 million in our local economy is tourism. It includes just under 1,300 direct jobs, and there's 146 million of direct value added through tourism. This is another example of trying to increase the economic activity through the Skywalk, and as has been mentioned, a lot of that has been funded elsewhere. So, look, tough decision tonight, but fully in support of the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Southwell. As we close the debate, Councillor Betts, I'd just like to make a few comments. And you talk about the Council of Bathurst. They started on this journey. they pulled out of applying for rate variations. They are now on what's called a financial watch list, and I think if you watch this space into the future, I feel very sorry for that community. We looked at the north of us. We've got Armidale. We've got other councils, 3 other councils I can think of. Armidale, for example, went for 53% increase in their rates. Their first iteration, I think, was nearly 30%, their first years. That community accepted because they knew they had to do it. They did it over 3 years, yes, Councillor Mears, but that was last year. That was a different set of circumstances. The councils of Walker have gone for nearly 60% increase last year. Council of Tenterfield went for 84%. Councils, we go down south to another council that's bigger than ours. They went for nearly 70% last year and they got it. Councils this year, right across the state, have applied for rate increases similar to ours. Councils across the state are in financial trouble. They have to do something. It's been recognised by both the state and federal government that is the case, and that's why we're having a hearing here in Tamworth on Thursday. With the council will be represented at, and I'll be representing country affairs at that same conference to talk about, or that same forum to talk about what is happening to country councils across New South Wales and their inability to function into the future. There are many councils, and members of the community out there may not understand, but there are many councils that their set rate increases over the last couple of years have not covered their depreciation costs, let alone anything else. So they're going backwards at a fast rate of knots. And of course, no council really can support its community if they're going backwards financially in the longer term. Councillor Betts, you'd like to close the debate?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor.
No.
I just wanted to answer a question you asked me when I was speaking about who the council was that got it over 3.
We'll come back to that later.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. My fellow councillors speaking for the recommendation have very succinctly covered most of the issues that really need to be addressed. Just one I will cover is that with the roads, and that's, as Councillor Southwell said, was one of the major things that the community wanted when we went to the election 2.5 years ago. Me having spent a whole career in the road construction industry, in the laboratories, and when roads look as though they are in a reasonable condition but they've gone to the end of their life, unless you seal them, you will lose that integrity of that road and the cost will just be, well, virtually prohibitive if you don't keep that maintenance program right up across your network. Just in summary, Mr Mayor, of all the submissions that the community put into the SRV process, including to council and to IPART did receive them all, and IPART did review them when they made this determination to allow us for the rate variation. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
That closes the debate, councillors. I'm now going to put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? You want a division, councillor?
Yes, please.
So, Councillor Rodder, Councillor Mears are against. All other councillors are in favour. That closes the vote. We'll move on to the next one, which is 9.5. Can I move in the second to Councillor Berg, second to Councillor Sutherland. Councillor Berg, you wish to speak to that?
Mr Mayor, thank you. Just briefly with the AR&I committee, we have to replace the retiring member, who I'd like to thank very much. He's Mr Masters. Mr Inglis, I think, comes with credentials, Mr Mayor. He was the former General Manager of the old Parishire Council. He transitioned to be the General Manager of the Tamworth Regional Council, the Amalgamated Council, and then he served a term as a councillor on the council as well, finishing last term. That was that long term of in excess of 5 years. Mr Mayor, I think he's extremely well credentialed. He's a man for detail. He understands finances, and I think it's a great acquisition to the AR&I committee.
Thanks, Councillor Berg. Anyone wishing to speak against? Any further comments on that appointment? Councillor Southwell.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just to concur with my fellow Councillor Burke, I 100% agree. I was lucky enough to work under Glenn Inglis for a short time when I worked at Tamworth Regional Council many years ago. Very, very good operator and very meticulous with the numbers, having his background as a previous general manager. So congratulations to him, and as it already has been mentioned, thank you to Mr Masters. This is one of the biggest committees of council. The amount of reading is very, very large, and so thank you to Mr Masters for taking that on and the contribution that you've made during your time, and congratulations to Glenn Inglis, and wish you all the best in the new role.
Thank you. Further comments, councillors? There are no further comments. I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Councillors, we'll move on to community services, item 10. Item 10.1, do we have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Betts, seconded Councillor Sutherland. Councillor Betts, you wish to speak to that? Anyone wish to speak against that? There been any further comments, councillors?
Just a quick comment, Mr Mayor. This recommendation is an example of the discretionary use of some of the funds to be able to make sure that we can build and develop community. You know, this is approving regional events marketing support program that is looking to spend or invest $28,000 into the community with a projected return of $8 million. You know, in anyone's eyes, that is a great turnaround. You know, this is the level of community building that council has the ability to do, and it's great to see it come forward in a formal report like this and in full support of the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sutherland. Further comments, councillors? There being no further comments, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. We'll move on to 10.2. Move Councillor Sutherland, do you wish to?
Thank you. Can I move it with an amendment?
Yes, you can.
Is that all right?
You got a seconder?
Yep, happy to second.
Just,
Oh.
You're just
moving a motion.
Moving a motion.
Yes.
Sorry. And the motion be that this recommendation be deferred, that we have a workshop in weeks to come and this report be returned back to council in future weeks.
Second, Councillor Burke. Anyone wish to speak against that? Further comments, councillors? Councillor Coates.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just have a question in terms of, for me, this is about presenting the business case and council looking at endorsing that. And I'm just wondering what's going to actually happen out of that deferment. I mean, I did have some concerns in terms of whether or not there was some misunderstanding about where the land sales stood in terms of the business case, but I'm just wondering what we aim to actually gain out of a deferment.
Councillor Coates.
When we may be able to just separate the two items.
Councillor Coates, I think there was some confusion about land sales which didn't exist. A deferment will allow councillors to get a better understanding from the start into the future. Councillor Rodder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, it did exist on, I think, page 401.
Are you speaking for this or to this or against it?
I'm actually supportive of the deferment, but I just wanted to say, Mr Mayor, that the final recommendation on the last page of the annexures of this predetermined that council was going to move forward with a certain plan that was presented to us to sell the land with terms and conditions that, frankly, we as councillors have not yet agreed to and which had not yet been made public. So, look, I wanted that removed out of the original recommendation, but if we, discuss it at a workshop and it is finally removed, I think that would be more palatable to me.
Yeah, that's fine, Councillor Rodder, but you understand that you can't sell any land, as council can't sell any land unless it comes to council for a formal consideration, and the recommendation is either adopted or not adopted. But really, the purpose of this report was to seek an adoption of the business plan so the council could take some advantages for future funding opportunities. But with the deferment, from speaking to many other councillors, seems to be the way to go. Further comments? There being no further comments, I'll put the recommendation that this matter be deferred. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Councillors, that brings us to the end of open council. And I'll ask the General Manager on item 11, is there any reports that are to be considered in closed council? Is there any request for them to be with open council? Is there anyone in the audience wishing any of the reports in closed council to be moved to Open council, there is not, so councillors, I'll ask for a motion to move into closed council. Councillor Southwell, second. Here's all those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Those against, we will move.
Pete's going to see if anybody would like to come back in just to finalise.
It's his sort of the theatre, isn't it? Right, please.
Yeah.
Capel theatre stuff with him.
All of you.
With ropes.
Are we open?
Been there before.
Councillors, General Manager report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council list to report of the closed session of the ordinary council meeting held on the 20th of June 2024. In closed council, you considered 4 items of business, and for each of those items, you adopted the recommendation of the business paper.
I have a motion to accept. Councillor Burke, second by Councillor Ayres. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Meeting closed.